Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're glad you're here to learn all about planning for retirement and for the future of your estate. My name is Carrie. I am the webinar facilitator today. In a moment, we'll hear from our host, Sarah Hillier, Director of Estate Solutions at ClearEstate, and Samantha Vient, Director of Financial Planning at Retirable. We're just about ready to get started, so let's take a look at the agenda first. So first, Samantha from Retirable will be speaking about details and timing of Social Security and Medicare, investing for income longevity, and how to prepare for the unexpected. And then Sarah from ClearEstate will talk about estate expenses and liquidity, the basics of estate planning, and how to optimize your estate plan. And now we'll move forward. Welcome, Sarah and Samantha.
Thanks very much, Carrie. Appreciate that warm intro and welcome everyone. Happy to have you here today. Super excited to co-host with Samantha from Retirable and share some really useful information with you today. Just before we get into the content, really quickly introduction to myself. I have quite a bit of experience in the estate and trust field, helping and supporting families to understand the complex topics involved and provide them with practical guidance that fits their circumstances. And in terms of ClearEstate and who we are and what we're all about, what we do is we're essentially a one-stop shop for all things estate planning and estate settlement. We try to do that in a simple and straightforward way. We've developed a platform, so we leverage technology to actually make the processes more efficient and more modern than what is currently available out there, and provide support that really fits the circumstances and feels right for what's desired given the particular situation. Demystifying is the word we use often, is what we're trying to do. And I think that aligns with Samantha and the work that she does as well. So I'll go ahead and let her introduce herself as well.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Thanks, Carrie, for kicking things off. So excited to be here with y'all today and talk about things that we can do as we get really close and transition into retirement to make sure that we protect our estate, our longevity, and our assets. So my name is Samantha Vient, as Carrie explained, and I am the Director of Financial Planning at Retirable. I've been a certified financial planner since 2010. I got into the industry around 2007. I helped my brother actually build his CPA practice. So I have a nice foundation in tax planning. And my specialties truly are retirement planning, cash flow, tax planning. I've dedicated quite a few years of my career into the fintech space, really focused on developing financial planning tools and support for folks that have traditionally been ignored by the industry. It's a true passion of mine. We're developing tools here at Retirable for mass market. We're so excited about what we're building. My favorite part of what I do is working with clients and watching them gain more clarity, more peace of mind as we start to put their financial plans into motion. So it's that aha moment that clients have that really excite me, to start to see all of the things come together and their lives get better. A little bit about Retirable. So we are an SEC registered financial advisory firm that specializes specifically in retirement planning. So that truly is our niche. From investing to planning to spending, we are helping every retiree and soon to be retiree thrive during those years. Every client that comes to us will work with a dedicated financial advisor, a fiduciary, across retirement income, investing, planning, so that we always know each month when you're in retirement, what's safe to spend. So that's a real big concern, right? When we talk about protecting our legacy, that spending number is really important. So we're really focusing on the investments, how much folks can spend as they transition into retirement and beyond. All right, so let's jump in here. When we think about protecting our legacy in retirement, a lot of things come into play at once. I think the biggest mindset shift for most folks is they've been working their entire lives, and they might get into, just hypothetically, someone's entering into their 60s and thinking about, okay, I've been working and saving all this time. Some of us have saved more than others, but we all have the same concerns. We're all looking for peace of mind around, do I have enough? And so when you're getting closer to that retirement transition, it's really important to kind of shift that mindset to no longer growth and saving, but more preservation, longevity. And the first topic that I want to talk about is Social Security and how that fits into your overall picture of income. It's a big one. For some folks, Social Security is going to represent a percentage of their income that they're going to live off of retirement, but for others, it's a significant portion. A lot of the clients we work with, Social Security is going to make up half of their income each month. So the timing around Social Security is extremely important. I will talk a little bit about, how we do it and how we sign up, but really I wanted to talk about it in a broader context of retirement, your income, and how to maximize that. Once you do turn on Social Security, I think most folks know, but I will just say this, once you turn that benefit on, you're locking yourself into a paycheck each month that is pretty much fixed. It's not going to change over time. So it's a really big decision. For those of you that don't know, Social Security you're able to turn it on at age 62. So you can start receiving your retirement benefits as early as 62. For most people, age 66 or 67 is when you're going to get to your full retirement benefit age. But if you continue to delay it out past 66, 67, up until age 70, you're maximizing your benefit. And so what does that mean? Well, before you just decide, I'm going to retire at 65, my benefit looks pretty good, it's $1,800 a month, I'm going to start taking it at that age, you want to really make a list of all of your assets, all of your invested assets, all of your sources of income, and start to put together a plan. Start to look at, well, how much might I draw down from my 401k or my IRA? If you have maybe a rental property, what is that going to net each month to support me in retirement? Maybe you have a little bit of pension. So truly part of building this retirement plan is coordinating that Social Security income with your other assets. And that is going to also guide that decision about timing around your Social Security. So while you might be itching to retire at 65, pushing that Social Security benefit out to 67 or even to age 70 is oftentimes optimal. When I'm running financial plans with my clients, the optimal age, coordinating that income and those assets with Social Security, your other assets with Social Security, typically age 67 or 70 is going to be that optimal timing. So it's a very, very big decision. And it's going to determine in the future how much you have to draw down from your other assets. So if you're planning on leaving some of your investable assets to your beneficiaries, to children, thinking through that Social Security choice and trying to get the largest benefit you can could be a real good thing in the long run for some people, because it's going to leave more assets there in your retirement accounts at the end of your life to pass on. So again, coordinating all these sources of income is really important. Some of the details. So those of you that are getting close and you know you're going to file soon, or you're just kind of wondering, I'm thinking about this date, but I'm not sure what my benefit amount is, go to www.ssa.gov if you haven't already. You can sign up for an account. They're actually revamping the Social Security site right now. I hope that it becomes more user-friendly, that we all hope that. But so you can sign in, you can see your benefit amount at the different ages to start giving an idea of what that monthly payout could be. And if you're ready to sign up, you can actually start your benefit. You can turn those retirement benefits on also on the online account. There's also a phone number for those of you that just want to call and get started, but the website can be a great place to start your planning. And then I just wanted to call out two scenarios where it may make sense for you to take Social Security early. If you are ill, have a terminal illness, or your life expectancy is not that high, turning Social Security on at 62 could be the right choice for you. Another example of taking it early and that, being a better choice for you is just if you're having trouble, maybe you were laid off during the pandemic and you've been having trouble getting work and you don't qualify for Social Security disability benefits. Of course, if you have to turn that benefit on to make ends meet, we all need to survive. So there are these outlying cases where taking it early can make sense, but working with somebody that's an expert in that area to look at all the angles can be really, really helpful for making that big Social Security decision. It's a real big one that sets you up for hopefully success for the rest of your retirement. So that's a big one. And I think we got a question on Social Security come in prior to the webinar. Do we have that one, Carrie?
Yes. Hi, Samantha. Sorry, we do. We did receive a question that says, I am 64. When should I sign up for Social Security? So just in line with what you've been speaking about.
Great, great. And I hope that to whomever asked that question, you kind of have a better sense of the fact that timing is really a personal issue. It's a great reason to get kind of a second opinion and a second set of eyes on the year that you're thinking about retiring. So of course, you're going to want to look at when you do retire, what sources of income do you have to draw on? What is the impact if you retire at 65 and then delay Social Security to get your maximum benefit? Let's just say to age 70, what sources of income do you have to live off of for the next 5 years? What is the impact on your longevity to your assets if you decide to delay Social Security versus maybe retiring at 65 and taking it at 67? So there is definitely some math that goes behind that decision. We like to run it through our financial plans, but it's going to be a very unique situation for each person. And you're just going to be looking at household expenses, what income is needed to cover, and how to coordinate your benefits with other retirement assets to make it all work, and also to make sure that it lasts the longest. So those decisions and the timing around it can really impact the longevity of your assets. So hopefully that helps. We're going to pop in a thing for a free consultation if you want to meet up with me, after the webinar, where we could walk through some of these things. But let's jump into Medicare next and managing healthcare costs. So again, in the context of protecting our legacy during retirement, this is another big decision, Medicare. When we're thinking about our long-term health, the longevity of our plan, that decision of Medicare that becomes available to you at the age 65 is also, it's a big one. It's a big one because we know that healthcare and health concerns and unexpected costs can derail somebody's retirement plan. So when we think about protecting, we want to do the right choice with Medicare. At 65, if you've paid into the system, Medicare becomes available to you. So for those of you that are retiring at 65, stepping away from a health plan at work, at 65, you can sign up for Part A, which is hospital benefits, and Part B, which is just the general medical coverage. There's no cost for A, but Part B does have a premium that's right now averaging most Americans around $170 a month. For those of you that are higher earners, the premiums can go up, but and they cap around $580 this year. But for most Americans, you're going to get that Part B health coverage for $170 a month. Before I go into kind of the supplemental plans that I think are really smart to take a look at, just to make sure you have that coverage, let's just talk quickly about folks that are still working. So you become eligible for Medicare at age 65, but you're still working. You still have a plan through work. You can still sign up for Part A, which gets you into the system. You log into that same Social Security website and you can turn on just Medicare benefits without turning on your Social Security benefits. And you'll wait to sign up for Part B. And then once you leave your job and you need a plan, you will have 8 months after that to sign up for Part B. And even if you didn't sign up for Part A, that does qualify you. Again, leaving a plan at work for retirement does qualify you for special enrollment post age 65. So just some things to consider, the timing of that. For folks that have a health savings account, an HSA, and you're still contributing to that, and you still are working past the age of 65, you can't contribute to an HSA anymore if you sign up for Medicare. So that's really something to consider. If you want to keep maxing out your HSA every year and you're past the age of 65, you can delay signing up for Part A Medicare. And you will want to keep doing your HSA. And then when you do retire and sign up for Medicare, you want to stop the HSA contribution, and you can enroll during the special enrollment period. Okay. So finally, I think important to just the basics around signing up is this idea of protection from a medical emergency during retirement. Part B and Part A in Medicare don't cover everything. So there's these supplemental plans that are offered by insurance companies, mainly Medicare Advantage plans and Medigap plans. And they work a little bit differently from one another, but you should be looking at these things pretty far out ahead. I mean, a year before you decide to get on the Medicare plan, I'd be looking at your options and really thinking through which type of plan is going to suit you based on what you know about yourself today. We can't predict all the future issues that will come up. But if you've got some things going on, or you have an idea that you're going to be traveling a lot, these different plans can be good for different types of people. So Medicare Advantage is going to take the place of traditional Medicare. And also most cases is going to cover prescription drugs. So Part D are prescription drugs for Medicare. Advantage plans can cover all of these areas. They tend to be a little bit more affordable, but they also are less flexible. You probably have to get referred out to a specialist. Maybe could be considered more like an HMO. It works more like an HMO if you're used to that. But they are more affordable. So for folks that are right now healthier, don't have a lot of health issues going on, a Medicare Advantage plan might be great. So explore those. Alternatively, Medigap, just like it sounds, works with Medicare, traditional Medicare, to fill in the gaps, fill in the holes. It does provide folks with more flexibility. And also, if you travel or have homes in different states, it does allow you to see doctors cross border, if you will, cross state. So it has that more flexibility. But typically Medigap plans are for folks that have a little bit more out of pocket each month to spend on premiums. They want that higher level of coverage. Or if they have pre-existing conditions, that's going to let them see their specialists and have more flexibility. Again, a little higher cost, but if you've got pre-existing conditions, this could be the way to go for you. Just something to flag really quickly is that with the Medigap plan, when you sign up for Medicare, you can get into a Medigap plan without any medical exam. They don't require any underwriting. But if you decide to switch into that later or delay or miss that initial enrollment period, they're going to make you go through underwriting. And if you have a pre-existing condition, you could get denied. So this is why planning ahead, talking to a specialist, talking to somebody that can really guide you towards the right plan for you can serve to protect your retirement plan and your retirement legacy ahead of time. And really understanding too how those premiums are going to fit into your overall budget, which I'm going to talk about budgeting and spending in just a moment. So again, the medical issue, again, costs of knowing ahead what your costs are during retirement for medical, and then also just making sure you have that plan and that protection around you. So let's talk next about investing. I think that the investing one is really when we have people come through to Retirable asking for help with their retirement, it's 75% of the time pertaining to their investment strategy. So why might that be? Again, going back to the initial intro that I gave about folks working their whole lives, saving in their 401ks, their IRAs, their different qualified accounts. The hard part, of course, is saving, but the investment strategy, it's geared towards growth. You have a long time horizon where you can put your money in the stock market. And for those of us that don't want to pull in and out at every market up and down, we've watched that nest egg grow over time. So it's a pretty simple, straightforward strategy. And when you get close to retirement, you're going to start worrying about the volatility in the market a little bit more. You don't feel like you have that time anymore. And so the strategy shifts from more of an offensive growth strategy to a long-term preservation, again, protecting that legacy over time, making sure you have enough to spend each month. And that's really what we specialize in at Retirable. We have a very specific strategy around our investments for clients that serve to protect them, provide that income, but also enough growth that their assets continue to last and fight off things like inflation over time. So first and foremost, anytime you're thinking about your investments in retirement, you need to have a plan. You need a financial plan so that you're tying that investment strategy back to your specific plan based on your unique goals, your unique timeline and life situation. And then also a risk tolerance. We're going to always ask clients 6 questions about how they feel about their investments and risk. And those two things come together to really guide an investment strategy where people really understand and feel comfortable with a certain amount of money to spend each year. That's really important that you understand what you can spend each year. Another flag that I'll just call out, not going into any depth here in this presentation, but a big consideration when you're investing for retirement is the fact that at age 72, if you have money in a traditional 401k, 403b, or an IRA, you must take required minimum distributions. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because you want to have a plan around that. But for folks that actually, maybe you have a pension that covers your day-to-day living expenses, and you also have an IRA, and you don't need that money. You don't need to take distributions per se from your IRA to live off of. Well, unfortunately, the government says, yes, you have to. So that's going to play into this investment strategy that I'm about to describe. So we're thinking about longevity, protection, but a little bit of growth for retirement. It's not the same pure growth strategy prior to retirement that we're used to. And we at Retirable approach it with a 3-bucket system where we divide up all of your cash and accounts based on the first bucket is determining what you're going to need to draw from your accounts to live off of in the first year. Hold that in cash. We want that ready to go, ready to spend for that year, so you can feel safe and secure that the year out ahead is covered and you're not really worried about the markets too much. The second bucket is your next 10 years of cash flow. So again, even for those of you that think you don't need to draw on your IRA or your old 401k in the next 10 years, if you have RMDs coming, we want to put that money in a safer bucket that's balanced, mostly focused on fixed income so that it can continue to fill up the next year's cash needs. But it's really like a more conservative, more balanced approach to your overall investments. And then finally, everything that's 10 years out and beyond, the remainder of your money, that we say can be more focused on growth. That's going to provide that buffer against inflation long-term, the longevity, and really be more allocated towards stocks. And we blend all that together. And this is your investment portfolio that's going to support you during retirement, give you that cash flow that you need with the right balance between income and growth. All right. And I think we're getting close, and I have one more slide. So I want to make sure that I get through that. We did have a question really quick on the investment side. Someone come through, I think, about, Carrie, do you mind just reading that off and I can quickly address that one?
Right. We got this question prior to the webinar. Are precious metals a good investment in these inflationary and uncertain times? What is the best approach to investing in precious metals?
Yeah, I would just real quickly take it back to the overall, the comment I made earlier about having a retirement plan and aligning an investment strategy with that plan. Your investments, just like when you were saving for retirement, during retirement, you want a diversification. You can achieve that through low-cost ETFs, exchange-traded funds, which are just baskets of shares of companies that you get access to through these funds that are going to give you exposure to international markets, domestic markets, stocks, bonds, large companies, small companies. You really want that diversification. And within those assets and in those funds, you'll find that there'll be some commodities, precious metals, things that'll fight inflation. Real estate is a good inflation fighter. So I know right now, inflation can be scary. And we're all kind of looking at like, where do we run and we put our money right now? But if you have a plan and investment strategy in place, your plan should always have these kind of market fluctuations covered. And so we're not running around trying to buy and sell and time the market, but rather have a diversified portfolio in place at all times so that whenever certain market conditions hit, we know that we're covered in that area. Again, we do offer that consultation. So if you have more specific questions, we can talk through that, and we can talk about investing that's more specific to you. And then finally, the spending plan. I'm going to do this pretty quick here. So we've talked about maximizing income. We've talked about protecting through healthcare, and the big investment question, which is on the top of most people's minds. And once we have your investment strategy in place, we have your retirement plan in place, every year we're going to look at your budget, your spending plan, because this is truly the tool. Going back to fears about inflation or the wars going on in the world right now, or the market volatility, spending is truly something that we can control over time. And that decision that we make on a year-to-year basis around how we spend our money can have a huge impact on our legacy and how long it lasts. And so I love looking at spending as a means to have control in our lives. Upfront, getting a budget in place is going to take a lot of organization. I recommend doing a 3 to 6 month look back. If you're getting close to retirement, do a 3 to 6 month look back. What were you spending your money on? What does that look like? And how does that number impact this longevity of your investments and the income coming in? Are you spending too much? Are you spending too little? Try to create a baseline budget. And then every year, when we review your financial plan and your budget together, we will look at the market conditions, things like inflation, decide, okay, what is your safe to spend number? And so you create these guardrails. You have a baseline budget, and we're going to create these guardrails around your spending plan that tell you in certain market conditions and years, you might be able to spend a little bit more. And other years you can spend a little bit less, but that really gives you a lot of control over the performance and the longevity of your retirement plan. And so this is why having a spending plan going into retirement is just a great way to start protecting your legacy for the long term. I will say this, with the flexible spending, which is more choice-based, you have your utilities, your, maybe a car payment, your housing, things like that, that you have to do to survive. But with your flexible spending, tapping into your value system is really important, and decide, is the way I'm spending my money bringing me joy in life? And if you, during that look back period, can see areas where it's just some of the decisions you made aren't really adding value to your life, you can cut that out. And that's a great way of kind of bringing spending down without feeling like you're on a money diet. We never like to put people on money diets. That's sometimes why I don't like that B word, the budget word, but spending plan. So spending plan, super important. And then the final thing I will say, which I think will be a really nice lead into what Sarah is going to discuss in just a moment, is emergency fund. So we have healthcare covered, we've got our investments and our income, but we still can't always predict what is coming our way in terms of a home repair needed or an accident or something. So having an emergency fund in retirement is going to help protect you from taking a huge lump sum from an unexpected expense out of your retirement accounts, which were not part of your plan. So it's really going to help. Again, it's an extra layer of protection around your legacy that's going to help you in retirement, help your plan last as long as it needs to. Your income is going to provide for you because you've got that emergency fund in place, and you're covered if something happens. So in the event of time, I'm going to pass it off to Sarah, who's going to jump into some discussion about estate planning. And thank you, Sarah. Take it away.
Thanks, Samantha, for sharing all that with us. Very, very interesting topics, and extremely important, of course. I don't know that I've ever heard of budget being referred to as the B word, but I think it's appropriate. That it can be a scary term to throw around. And I like that you guys seem to really, as part of your sort of the way you operate is focus on, values as part of your planning process, which I think is incredibly important, and is something that we also try to do at ClearEstate when we're working with clients on estate planning. So to dive in there, the first thing we're going to really talk about is estate expenses versus liquidity. And I'm going to share that slide with you here. I meant to actually have these transition in so it wouldn't be this horrifying giant list all at once. But the truth and reality is that we've got quite an exhaustive list here of the typical expenses that can be anticipated in your estate. And when you're reflecting on retirement planning and also taking it a step further and looking at estate planning, it's really important to understand, similar to, your budget for spending and the expenses that you expect, to look at what expenses will actually be there in your estate, of course, as well. So we put together this list. I'm just going to go over some of the sort of nuances of the different things and why they matter and give you a few examples. Now, I'll say it's a little bit difficult to be specific about how much we can anticipate each of these things might cost because of course it's very first of all jurisdiction specific. So each state has its own sort of way of operating, legislation, etc. But on top of that, it also depends on your estate assets, the value of those assets, et cetera, et cetera. But first, I'll just talk about funeral expenses. I think that's kind of an obvious one, but often people are surprised to find out exactly, how much funeral expenses might cost. Huge range there, but typically it's in the thousands of dollars, depending on how much sort of frills are involved. You can pre-arrange those. Sometimes that's even worked into your budget as well, but it's something that there's sometimes sort of associated expenses with your passing that people don't anticipate, such as if you had perhaps something medical related that happened to you at that time, and or if perhaps you need to be returned home if you were perhaps somewhere else or abroad, and all those things can be vary in expense, but can be significant. Of course, your outstanding bills and debts are a responsibility of your estate. So anything and everything that you are already on the hook for, your estate would essentially be on the hook for as well. Ongoing maintenance can be a wide variety of things. The obvious ones would be, for example, if you own a home, the utilities, the property taxes, everything associated with the normal maintaining of the home would need to continue to be paid in your estate. And oftentimes, if there's now the property's vacant, if that's the case, now we have to think about, is there adequate insurance on the property? Is it being checked? Also, just, even your investments will continue to have costs of investing, all sorts of different things that you normally would be expenses associated with your assets, okay? Income tax and probate, this is obviously a big, broad category. So of course, there's, your final tax return and any taxable events that occurred, in that year that would usually be taxable if you had income of any kind, etc. In terms of estate tax, the threshold for that is quite high, but there is potentially estate tax for high net worth estates, and estate tax returns are filed annually while the estate remains open and earns more than $600 worth of income. So there's ongoing tax reporting requirements potentially, and then any outstanding tax returns that were not previously filed are still due and potentially overdue. So those need to be addressed as well. Probate fees, which is a big one, and it varies significantly from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. In some jurisdictions, there isn't any probate fees. In some jurisdictions, they're court filing fees. They really can range quite significantly, but the court filing fees, so the probate fees can be a percentage, often tiered based on the value of the assets. The court filing fees can be anywhere from $50 to $1,200. When probate is granted, there's a certificate that often is needed, an original, and that's $5 to $20 depending on how many you need. And just to back up a step, for those who aren't familiar with probate, what probate is essentially, it's a process where a legal process which validates your will, if there is one, as well as validates the representative of your estate. So your executor, if they're appointed in your will, or whomever is the appropriate party to come forward if you don't have a will, okay? It can be required depending on a number of factors, including how you actually, the ownership structure of your assets, I'll say. So assets that are forming part of your estate, when your executor goes to deal with those assets and actually transfer them or provide instructions on how to deal with them, the third parties in many cases will require this some type of probate process, which again varies by jurisdiction. And so that's a significant piece of your estate settlement, and definitely a big part of estate planning is thinking that through. What is probate going to look like for my estate? And of course, can we avoid it? Can we think about, different ways to deal with it? That's a huge component. Because I'll say too, and this is when we get into the liquidity aspect of things, is there's often a timing issue when we're talking about estate expenses, in that there's all these immediate needs for expenses to be paid in order for the executor, the estate representative, to take care of the assets, to preserve and protect them before distributing them. And when they do that, they may not actually have access to cash, either because they're not authorized to access the cash yet, or in some cases because we've done estate planning without thinking about the entire picture as a whole. And we've done all sorts of creative things to have maybe assets passed jointly, or maybe we've created a trust, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a sec, but we've done some great things, but now maybe our estate is actually cash poor, right? Which we see occur quite a bit, and is something that, careful planning is important to address. Some of the other things real quick are just typical vendors that you may need in your estate settlement. You may need appraisers to actually value anything from real estate to business interests to even personal effects, collectibles, things like that. Obviously, realtors, if there's property to be sold, property managers, if there are those vacant properties, home cleaning, clear out, dealing with the personal effects is often a huge piece of the estate settlement. And of course, accountants potentially to prepare and file tax returns, lawyers potentially, depending on the nature of the estate. Of course, ClearEstate is we support families with estate settlement. We do it in a bit of a different way than traditionally is done by probate lawyers, providing a bit of a different option, because one thing that's important to note is that in some states, there actually are statutory fees that lawyers can charge, which means that they can charge a percentage of the value of the estate rather than a flat rate or an hourly rate for their services. So that can sometimes eat significantly into the value of the estate. And of course, there's also executor compensation, which, whether that's done by a professional or an individual, the executor is entitled to compensation. So that's all important things to think about when we're mapping out our estate and the expenses we expect there. So here, just really quickly, I wanted to go over the basics of estate planning. I imagine most of you are interested in retirement planning. This is also a topic of interest of you, and maybe you've done some estate planning already. That's fantastic. But we know that over half of Americans actually don't have a valid will in place. And in fact, even those who do, typically it's outdated. And their circumstances have actually changed and they haven't had a chance to update it. So first of all, we just want to clarify definitions. Of course, an estate plan really is the arrangements for what is going to happen with your assets when you pass away. So super simplified explanation there. But what I want to emphasize is when we talk about estate planning, it's everything as a whole, right? It's a holistic view of all of the sort of practical and logistical steps that are going to need to be carried out. Always with the sort of values-based, like Samantha was talking about, where we are going first with what are your actual goals, what's important to you, and then working from there. So it's taking everything into account. The documents that are typically involved themselves are, of course, your will, in which the main things, most important things you're going to dictate are who's going to be responsible for your estate settlement, so who's your executor, and how you want your assets to be distributed. Okay, your financial power of attorney is also an important document to have in place that sets out who's going to be responsible for your finances if you were to become incapacitated. Okay, your medical power of attorney is who is going to be responsible for you as a person if you were to become incapacitated. So around, what your needs are, your health care, things like that, that person is going to be responsible for those things. A living will is where you go further with directives for your healthcare intentions. So in a living will, you could actually set out specific directives that you don't want to leave to your medical power of attorney to decide, making things easier for them ultimately if there's difficult decisions to be made. A revocable living trust, which is is a document that could be relevant to you. Of course, looking at your overall plan carefully always, but the idea with a revocable living trust, which is often done in many states, is to actually place assets in this trust during your lifetime, and as a result, have those assets actually bypass the probate process. Which is beneficial, not just from an expense perspective, but also from a time savings and I'll say headache savings perspective for your family members, right? So that's something that could be applicable to you. And I would say the purpose of estate planning, and really the reason why we encourage people to do it, even though it's not fun, and even though there's complexities involved, that it causes you to think about a lot of different things and piece them together, is that really it's going to allow you to make things actually simpler for your family when the time comes. It's going to take into account your specific circumstances and make sure that what's going to happen makes sense with what you actually expect to happen, right? And in the many years that I've been supporting estate planning and estate settlement, there's so many issues that can potentially arise in estate settlement. I could do probably a whole webinar series on, problematic situations. And really the idea behind putting your mind to estate planning is to avoid those unfortunate circumstances, right? What happens without one, I'm just going to highlight a couple of things, is if you don't have a will at the very least, there is no automatic representative of your estate. And in almost all jurisdictions, that creates some hoops that your family will have to jump through to be able to even do something as simple as cancel a regularly scheduled bill, right? Anything and everything to actually represent your estate becomes much easier for your loved ones if you've turned your mind to estate planning and done at the very least a will, but hopefully also a complete plan. So this slide, I wanted to take you through a little bit more details on how you actually can work to optimize your estate plan and make sure that you are going to successfully accomplish your goals. So what I've highlighted here is kind of the process that we take folks through in terms of, and what we encourage people to do in terms of estate planning. And the first thing, of course, is definitely seek professional guidance. I put this first because I do think it's really your first step is to consider professional support and guidance. And I will also say the right professional support and guidance for you, right? So there there is all sorts of options available out to you there. And I mean, most people turn to certainly a lawyer, a financial planner. I would say definitely you want to work with folks who are specialized in estate planning. That's the number one thing. There's lots of folks who dabble in it and will prepare a will or will do things, you know, here and there, but they don't actually specialize in it. So I would say that's the first most important thing, and that they're equipped to deal with, you know, the complexities of your situation. Definitely ClearEstate is a great option. And as Samantha does, we offer free consultations as well to chat about your specific circumstances and how we might further support you. The next step that's really crucial is, of course, compiling all your pertinent info. So I've made that sound super simple, but in fact, it's huge because we're talking about everything it is about you that makes you you, as well as all of the actual documentation that proves that, right? So the main most important thing is probably an inventory of your assets and liabilities, which hopefully if you've done your financial planning, that's an important piece, obviously, of what you do in financial planning. Now we're going to take it one step further. So now we have this list of what do you own and what do you owe, right? That's a good starting point. But now we're also going to collect and compile all of your account information, all of your, you know, documentation, your marriage certificate, your, you know, what financial institutions you have bank accounts at, what type of accounts, you know, how those accounts are owned, if you have valuations for any of your assets, you know, if anything and everything, including those pertinent estate planning documents, but also basically everything that your executor is going to need when that time comes. So that's what we mean when we say, use the simple statement, compile your info, okay? The next step, and probably the most important step, is to consider your goals and your beneficiaries. And by that, we really mean what and who is important to you, right? What exactly matters to you in terms of your estate plan. And there's no right or wrong answer to this question, right? It's really all about you, your personal circumstances, your family circumstances. What might matter to one may not matter at all to another, right? So it's important to kind of clarify that and start from that. The next thing is choose your representatives. This is critical. By representatives, we mean who's going to act as your power of attorney, who's going to act as your executor. The best laid out estate plan is absolutely going to fall apart if you have the wrong people in these roles, right? And we often help families with situations where the executor appointment was perhaps not carefully thought through in terms of the practical implications of that person carrying out their role. And by that, I mean, oftentimes lots of people just appoint their eldest child because it's a default that feels natural. However, then when it comes time for the practical application of that, then they have a lot of issues because maybe they're actually not local. Maybe they actually don't get along with the rest of their siblings. Maybe they're actually not well equipped to deal with the topics that they're going to be faced with, right? So that's what I mean by, you know, choose your representatives. Think about that carefully. Okay. Consider strategies for efficiency, of course, and savings is huge. We talked a little bit about probate. That's definitely a huge piece, but also just thinking through how things are actually going to practically play out, and is everything set up to successfully accomplish that. Okay. And sometimes that's as simple as, okay, I really want someone to get, you know, this particular piece of property, or like maybe it's a special gift, and just actually mapping that out. And like, maybe they live across the country. How are we getting it to them? Have we actually thought about all those things, right? And is there any ways we can simplify the circumstances so that things are easier when that time comes, right? Whether that's big or small. Understand how everything fits together. Of course, this is huge. It's really important that when you look at your estate plan, again, same as retirement planning, same as financial planning as a whole, you have to understand how everything fits together, because you could mistakenly fix one maybe medium-sized thing over here and create one large problem for yourself over here, right? So I could see Samantha shaking her head yes. So I know this is definitely something that's really important. Understand how everything fits together. And one thing that I talk to people about a lot is that when somebody's told them something and they kind of want to do that, but they haven't actually assessed whether it's a good strategy for them. So that's what we mean, right? Like we don't want you to create a trust just because your neighbor said that it was a good idea to do. We want you to actually look at your circumstances and understand them and understand how it impacts things first. The next two things really are kind of obvious, but maybe not. Actually prepare your estate planning documents, actually sign them, execute them, and then have them somewhere that people know they exist and that they're safe, and they'll be able to find them when needed. That's huge. There's no sort of national registry for wills. So if your original will if it's not known that you have an original will, then it's as if it doesn't exist, right? When that time comes. So you have to actually prepare the documents, execute the documents, and have them available. Communicate plan to loved ones. I'll say, with the caveat that in some cases, because of family dynamics, I understand it may be difficult to do that, and that's okay. But to the extent possible, we do encourage you to communicate your plan to loved ones. If you're appointing someone to act as your estate representative, they definitely should know about it, and at least know where to go or who to go for help, or the initial steps they should take, because otherwise, in a time of grief, they may feel, completely overwhelmed with having to take on this daunting task. And then, of course, revisit regularly, which is hugely important as well. So I hope that gives you a pretty good summary of the highlights of estate planning and why it's important, and some of the typical expenses you can expect may be applicable in your estate. I think at this point, we're going to move on to a bit of a question and answer period. If Carrie has some questions to share.
Yes, I do. We did receive a few more questions during the registration process. I'll continue on with the questions we received during registration. So this question is for Samantha. What is the fiscal obligation when I start to receive Social Security checks? Or in other words, how to file for income taxes when I'm retired?
Okay, yeah, so nothing changes there in terms of filing. You still need to file every year, just as you did before. Social Security, they do give you a break, if you will. It's not fully taxed, but above a certain amount, income taxes do kick in. So there is that kind of benefit that you get from the Social Security payments. But again, it's just going to be a matter of every tax year, you're going to gather your statements, you're from, various income sources. Think of it through any deductions that you might be getting, if you're still doing part-time work. So again, nothing big changes there. In terms of taxes. And if you're here and online listening and you have any follow-up questions, I'm happy to entertain that with more specificity.
Great, thanks, Samantha. This next one is for Sarah. I am 65 with a $400,000 mortgage, unlikely to pay off within 2 to 5 years with current income. I have a will, no other debts except for a car note. Do you still advise an estate plan? Why, or explain?
That's a great question, Carrie. And actually, I get some variation of this question often, and it's usually the frame here, I think, is my situation is very, simple. Why do I need to do, other things? But as I think, I hope that some of what we covered in the presentation shows is that, it's your estate plan is not necessarily doing big, complex, strategies that, think about savings necessarily. Your estate plan is also just actually collecting and compiling all of your pertinent information and documentation, which is part of what we do at ClearEstate. And the idea being that we use our platform, of course, but we also support it with real humans who are coaching you through things, is that when that time comes, with a few clicks of a button, the individual that you have appointed as your executor has everything that they need to actually move forward confidently, right? And that's what an estate plan, I'll say that's what a careful estate plan actually does. So I think it's more than just thinking about, okay, what debts are there going to be, but it's like, okay, how is this person going to practically access my home? How are they going to know where all of my pertinent information is, like what financial institution do they need to contact, what all of those things is all wrapped up in estate planning.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And we have one more question. I've appointed my kids as co-executors. What can I do to make sure they get along?
Oh, okay. That is a great question. I don't mean to laugh, but I probably need a whole webinar to talk about. And I have kids, so I know, like, first of all, there's nothing you can do to make them get along, right? But no, all jokes aside, when you're thinking about your estate plan and who's appointed as your executor, it is absolutely critical that you think practically about what's going to happen when, they actually go to do this work, right? Being appointed as an executor is an honor, but it's also a huge responsibility and even liability, right? So how do you make sure? There's a few things you can think about. Number one, talk to them about it. Please tell them, ask them, are you comfortable with this? This is what's going to be involved, right? Are you guys comfortable making decisions together, right? You can even, honestly, in the vast majority of cases, the more people learn about what is involved in an estate settlement, the more they're like, actually, no, thank you, right? Because it's massive. It's many hours of work over a long period of time, and you're accountable to others, and you're already, the situation can be highly charged, right? Because there's emotions involved, right? And there's grief. So I would say, think about what mechanism you can actually put in your will, in your plan, to address potential disputes, right? Because the worst case scenario, remember, the executors have to agree. So they have to move forward together. So your entire estate could just be stalled completely if there's disagreement or an executor who's failing to move forward, right? The other huge thing you can definitely think about is, do you even want your children to be appointed as your executor, right? Do you want to consider a professional executor, right? To just alleviate that burden entirely from your family. This is something that ClearEstate actually does, because we want to provide that option to just, we do the plan carefully with you, and then when the time comes, we execute, and we're just accountable to your family members. And that's completely alleviating the burden from them. So that's a great question, but yeah.
Where are ClearEstate and Retirable? Where are your services offered?
You want to go first, Samantha? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So we are headquartered in New York, and we have advisors throughout the country. We work remotely with folks over Zoom and phone and email and text. And so what that allows us to do is serve people in an affordable way so they can get human advice that they need without the, high brick and mortar costs.
Yeah, and on the same sort of note, ClearEstate also operates mostly remotely. We were founded in Montreal, but are in jurisdictions all across North America. In the US, we're currently in Arizona, California, Nevada, Florida, Texas, and coming soon to New Jersey as well, and expect to expand to other states too.
So again, we are done for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.